Hello, and welcome into the first episode of the BGN Draft Show. I'm your host, Shane Haff. We're going to get you guys covered for everything you need to know for the 2023 NFL Draft. We're going to kick things off tonight with a full first round mock draft, a good way to put some names on some teams, talk about some players in a little bit of an abbreviated way before we get into position breakdowns and other things as we get closer to the draft. So I am joined tonight for this mock draft by Mark from the Tough Cover Radio Show. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Mark Henry Jr. He is also my co-host on my podcast, Chalk Talk. Mark, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing great. I was talking to Dibes yesterday. I've officially turned the page to draft season. So yeah, I'm excited. This is the first mock we're doing where, we're controlling a whole bunch of teams. I'm sure we'll do a couple iterations of this. So I'm excited to get it going.
All right, awesome. And I'm also joined by Dibes. You can give him a follow on Twitter at Mr. Crockpot. Done a lot of podcasting with Dibes over the years. He is a draft nut. He's got like 20 some videos out already. It's crazy. Knows more about the draft than I do at this point, but I'm trying real hard to catch up. So Dibes, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me on. Of course, I'm excited. This is Christmas Day. I love mock drafts. I do them all the time. I've already done 2 the last 48 hours on my show, but I'm ready to get started, man. Let's do this.
Yeah, I did, and I forgot to mention Dibes from the Party on Broad podcast, so you can check out his work there as well. And so we're going to jump right into it, guys. We're going to be controlling all 31 teams. Well, I guess it's all 31 picks. There's multiple teams with more than one pick in this draft, and so we divided them up. It's roughly going to be every third pick, but we wanted to make sure that guys that had a pick for one team, if they picked again later, they'd have both. So I'm going to kick things off. I will be controlling the Chicago Bears at pick 1. A pick that I obviously do not think that they're going to make. I think there's going to be smoke about them moving on from Justin Fields. They're not going to move on from Justin Fields. That's a safety net for Brian Pools. If Justin Fields fails, he can throw his hands up and say, look, I built a great roster, but I didn't pick that quarterback. So I think they are heavily in the market to trade back. And I think there's, several teams that could want to make that move in the top 10. You got Houston obviously needs a quarterback. Indianapolis needs one. The Raiders need one at number 7. The Panthers at number 10. Even the Falcons at number 8. But I think it's always ideal to move back as little as possible. So, Mark, you control Houston. Does Houston have any interest in moving up to pick 1 for, I don't know, say pick 33 and a second next year?
Houston's fine sticking at 2. They like both of the quarterbacks. They've talked themselves into to either way that number 1's going to go.
All right. In that case, they're probably going to call up the Colts, and they're going to make a trade with the Colts, who I also control. So I can make sure this trade goes through. But I think, it's not important because we're not picking these other rounds. But what do you guys think? The price to move up from 4 to 1, that's probably a 2024 first and 2023 second, something in that neighborhood.
Yeah.
All right, so we're going to do pick 4, pick 35, and a 2024 first for the Bears with the Colts. So the Colts are going to move up to number 1, and they are going to select Bryce Young, quarterback out of Alabama, which the Colts need a quarterback. Frank Reich probably would like a mobile quarterback. Or excuse me, not Frank Reich, Shane Steichen. I'm in a few years ago, but Shane Steichen would obviously love to have a mobile quarterback. It is notable, though, Chris Ballard's quarterbacks in the time he's been GM. You've got Jacoby Brissett, Andrew Luck, Phillip Rivers, Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan. The smallest guy that they've had was 6'4", 220. And so Bryce Young is a huge outlier from that. For that reason, I'm not entirely sure the Colts would make the pick for Young, but I do think he's QB1 in this draft, so we're going to plug him in. And that will put the Texans on the clock at number 2. And so, Mark, that is you. You are up.
Yeah, so the Texans were hoping that the Colts would take Bryce Young, or that the Colts would take CJ Stroud there, I should say. The Texans were hoping Bryce Young would fall to number 2, but we've talked ourselves in. We like CJ Stroud. We were incredibly impressed by his performance against Georgia. I now I'm talking as myself, not as the fake Texans GM, but I don't know if I've ever had a player change my evaluation as much as CJ Stroud did in that one game against Georgia. And sometimes that can be a bit of a fool's decision to go all in on one game. But it's not like I was out on Stroud before. I had some serious questions, and I feel like Stroud answered a lot of them, especially with the mobility he showed in that game. That is just something we have not seen enough from Stroud. So Houston's at number 2. Do I think Stroud's the best player on the board here? No. I think I have him ranked number 6 or number 7 overall. But the Houston Texans GM, Nick Caserio, is going to get fired this year if he doesn't, at least win 5+ games and start to show some sign of improvement after firing 2 lame duck head coaches. Well, they've got their guy now. They've got DeMeco Ryans. I know he's not an offensive guy, but you have to go ahead and lock down quarterback. So the Houston Texans will take C.J. Stroud 2nd overall here. And I know that Dives and the Arizona Cardinals are
let's go.
All right, so we will book it. C.J. Stroud to Houston. Best possible board for Arizona, who does not want a quarterback, and you see quarterbacks 1-2. So, Dives, why don't you tell me, is it going to be Will Anderson or Jalen Carter in Arizona?
Arizona is doing backflips right now. Will Anderson Jr. lock it into the Arizona Cardinals, arguably the best player in this draft. Although I am a big Jalen Carter guy, I can't argue against Will Anderson's production. The guy is elite off the line of scrimmage. He's a twitch athlete, can change directions on a whim, explosive vertically, but explosive laterally as well. Terrific blend of raw strength and bend, man. This guy's ceiling is absolutely outrageous. I cannot believe he fell down to the number 3 pick. His combination of speed, power, length, burst, football IQ. The guy checks off all the boxes. Will Anderson to Jonathan Gannon at number 3.
Ooh, I almost even forgot about Jonathan Gannon being there now. Jonathan Gannon gets his pass rusher that can hopefully cover up some of the coverage behind. So, and so the Bears are up now, and I put the question to you, which guy do you want? And the Bears are going to take the other one. I've seen mocks with the Bears trading to 7, trading to 9, and I certainly think that the Raiders or the Panthers could put in, a comparable trade package, a good trade package. But at the end of the day, I see 2 elite blue chip players in this draft in Jalen Carter and Bryce Young. And if I move past 4, I'm not going to get one. And so I'm only really willing to trade down to 4, and I'm going to land Jalen Carter, interior defensive lineman, 6'3", 310 pounds. Doesn't have a lot of sacks as an interior defensive lineman, usually doesn't, but he was used in multiple alignments. He's all over the field at Georgia. He's got excellent hands. He's powerful at the point of attack. He's twitchy. He's quick. Honestly, I hate player comps, I say, as I'm about to make one, but I see a lot of Fletcher Cox in Jalen Carter. And so Jalen Carter to the Bears, their defensive line was atrocious last year. Everything about their defense was atrocious. Jalen Carter will go a long ways towards fixing that. And so the Bears pick up a 2nd-round pick this year. They pick up a 1st-round pick next year, and they still get one of the top 2 guys in the draft in Carter. That brings up the Seattle Seahawks at 5, which Mark, that is you. So
yes,
what
Seattle.
Do you have the Seahawks doing?
I think Jalen Carter, most people do have ranked above the guy I'm about to take, but I am an absolute stan for Myles Murphy, and you'll see that if you follow my Twitter over the next 2.5 months, because I'll be tweeting about him a lot. 6'5", 275, 3-year producer at Clemson, 18.5 sacks, 6 forced fumbles, 36 tackles for loss in 3 years. Didn't miss any games, didn't miss any time. The dude just turned 21. He was a 5-star top 7 prospect from his high school class. He was on the Bruce Feldman Freaks list, which is always a fun column to read, some of these athletic marvels. He bench presses 405 pounds, power cleans 335, and deadlifts 505. The dude is an absolute Mack truck. Not to mention he's 6'5", 275, like I already said. Like, when you can do that type of stuff, when you have that type of frame, to me, he combines all of that power, all that strength, all those traits that you want in a defensive end. He also has the highest motor of any defensive player in this class, in my opinion. That guy does not stop on tape, in my opinion. He gets his hands up. He's got 5 passes defense. Being 6'5" helps, but he also seems to just have a knack for reading when a quarterback's going to throw the ball. People think he needs to develop more pass rush moves and add to his repertoire, But what he's been doing has been pretty darn successful. And he's only 21. And he's, like I said, he's got all the traits in the world that you can want. You can move him around the D line. You can move him inside. You can move him outside. I think Myles Murphy is an absolute stud. And he's a guy I'm praying for the Eagles to get there at 10. But in this scenario, the Seattle Seahawks take him at 5. And by the way, Seattle, this is by far their biggest need. I think they're bottom 5 in pretty much every pressure rate, sack rate stat that you want to look at. If they were able to have, a premier pass rusher last year, that team probably would have been able to be taken a little bit more seriously. And that could be what happens this year, especially since they have another first-round pick to address another need.
Yeah, I know that you're a huge fan of Myles Murphy. He's never going to make it to 10 when doing mock drafts with you.
Yeah.
The Seahawks defense was atrocious, and so they definitely need to address that. I think that's a great pick, and that brings up a team that could go a lot of ways in the Detroit Lions at 6. So, Dibes, you got the Lions. What are you thinking here?
Speaking of atrocious defenses, all right, you look at the need for the Detroit Lions. I'm going to go with, I think, the 1A of this position. It's arguably the best position in the draft, at least when it comes to depth. I'm going to go Devin Witherspoon out of Illinois to the Detroit Lions. The Lions defense was a consistent sore spot last season. Jeff Okudah is a solid corner, but they definitely need to add playmakers and ball hawks to that secondary. Devin Witherspoon, what you need to know about that dude is he just has amazing closing speed. He's a great tackler. He's great in coverage. His A to B speed in this draft is elite. He's only 6 foot, 180 pounds, but he's just incredible when it comes to stopping the run, making plays behind the line of scrimmage. His tape is so much fun to watch if you haven't watched it already. Devin Witherspoon is going to add a big-time playmaker to that Detroit Lions defense.
All right, Witherspoon, the first cornerback off the board. I know that's something that people are going to be watching. Witherspoon might not be a name you've heard a lot yet. He's definitely flying up draft boards. So CB1 off the board to the Lions at 6. That brings up the Las Vegas Raiders at 7. The Las Vegas Raiders. Does anybody know who is on the depth chart for the Raiders at quarterback right now? I honestly don't know that.
No.
I know they released Carr. I don't even know if they. No, Stidham was a free agent.
He's a free agent. Yeah.
Chase Garbers is the only quarterback under contract, and as much as I am a draft guy, I have never heard that name in my life. So the Raiders are going to be really happy this draft fell the way it did. They're going to sprint to the podium, and they're going to take Will Levis out of Kentucky. Levis is kind of the ultimate bet on traits guy. I mean, he's got the NFL size. He's 6'3", 232 pounds, big arm talent. He's got all of the high ceiling, right, the upside, but he played at Kentucky, and he lost, I think it was Wan'Dale Robinson last year, and didn't really have much to work with this year, and his play kind of fell off. And so you're going to hope, betting on the traits, that you can get him on an NFL roster with Devontae Adams, obviously a top receiver, and you can get the most out of him. So he's turnover prone. He's kind of, again, the player comp thing, but the Josh Allen sort of type guy that he's coming out of college, and there's a lot of question marks, but everybody can see the tools and the upside, and somebody's going to bet on that. Honestly, it'll probably be somebody higher than number 7. But in this draft, the Raiders are going to get Will Levis at 7. QB3 comes off the board just ahead of 2 other teams that could probably use a quarterback. So we'll see what they do here. And that's going to bring up the Atlanta Falcons. Mark, you've got Atlanta. What are you thinking here?
So I've got Atlanta. I'm just not as high on the non-Stroud young quarterbacks in this class, so I won't be mocking them very often. So that's not where I'm going to look here at number 8. What I am going to say is, are any of the Panthers, Eagles, or Titans GMs interested in moving up to 8 here, just out of curiosity?
The Panthers will move up just one spot, just to play it safe. What would you do in exchange?
What would you? I'll let you make the offer here, Dibes. What are you looking to make up for moving up a pick?
I'll throw you a future second rounder.
Yeah, I'll take a second next year. Let's do it. It's a pick.
Okay, so the trade is the Falcons give 8 to the Panthers for 9 and a 2024 second round pick. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Let me force the trade. Okay,
All
Panthers
right.
are now on the clock.
Panthers wanted to just make sure they lock in kind of the last of the first round QBs, in my opinion, and that is Anthony Richardson out of Florida. I agree, Mark. I'm not as high on this guy, but this team is a team that likes to kind of roll the dice on some dicey quarterbacks. Sam Darnold, that experiment failed. The Baker Mayfield trade failed. You look at Teddy Bridgewater, Cam Newton, PJ Walker. The Carolina Panthers are going to try and roll the dice here with a guy in Anthony Richardson who has a lot of question marks. He's arguably the biggest boomer bust pick in this entire draft. But his combination of arm talent, athleticism, speed, ball velocity is just insane, man. When this guy's in rhythm, he really does make smart throws. He can fit the ball into tight windows. And you can't not talk about Anthony Richardson without mentioning his elite athleticism, man. It is something to watch, especially when he's in rhythm with that offense. I think this guy has Pro Bowl upside, but the guy's going to need at least a year or two to kind of get it together. I thought he should have stayed another year at Florida to continue developing, but you cannot deny this guy's upside. I have him. He's a much better prospect than Malik Willis last year. Anthony Richardson to the Carolina Panthers.
All right, and so that will put the Falcons back on the clock at 9. Mark, you bought yourself an extra pick for a guy you didn't want to begin with, so kudos on that. Now what are you thinking here at number 9?
Yeah, I'm taking the guy I would have taken at 8. I'm taking Tyree Wilson, defensive end from Texas Tech, 6'6", 275. High-level production over the last 2 years at Texas Tech after transferring from Texas A&M. 14 sacks, 27.5 tackles for loss in the last 2 years in 23 games. Top 4 pressure rate among all defenders in 2022. Quick first step while being able to bull rush you. That's a pretty scary combination if you're an offensive lineman having to deal with Tyree Wilson. He's got plays pushing offensive linemen into the ball carriers, which is always a crowd pleaser when you're watching tape of defensive linemen. That's always a fun one. Really, really good run defender. Might be the best part of his game. He doesn't have quite the bend that some people are looking for, but you guys know me. I skew towards these 6'5" and up defensive ends and edge rushers, and that always inevitably is going to come at the expense of bend generally. So I'm generally willing to sacrifice bend for size, strength, speed, and a guy who can rush the passer in his own way while also defending the run. If you can stay out there for 3 downs, like, you might not be the bendiest guy, you might not be a Son Reddick, but you've got your own way of getting to the passer. But to be fair, the reason that I have Murphy over Wilson is because I do think he has a bit more bend while having a lot of the similar traits and production that Wilson has. But I mean, Tyree Wilson is my number 5 overall player in the class. He's my number 4 defensive lineman, I guess. So that should tell you where the strength of this class is. And we've got 4 edge rushers / Jalen Carter going off the board in the top 9 here.
Yeah. All right. Well, that makes my pick a little easier, I guess, because I was really debating between at number 10 for the Eagles taking Tyree Wilson or taking another guy. So I guess I'll go with the other guy. And the Eagles are going to select Bijan Robinson. I'm just kidding. Don't shut off the podcast. Don't throw things at us.
You tricked me.
Wowzers.
So the Eagles, I was debating between Tyree Wilson and Christian Gonzalez, the cornerback out of Oregon. And so Christian Gonzalez is going to be the pick here for the Eagles at 10, 6'2", 201-pound corner out of Oregon. He's 21 years old. He had 50 tackles, 4 interceptions, and 7 pass breakups this year. Gonzalez is a big, long corner, and honestly, he's got lockdown coverage skills. He's a freak athlete. He clocked 23.3 miles per hour in a game on GPS in 2021. I think he is a stud cornerback in the making. I go back and forth on if he's my CB1 or if I'm losing. What's the name? Who's the guy we already drafted? I got to scroll up. Devin Witherspoon. Yeah, I go back and forth between Witherspoon and Gonzalez, and I need to watch more tape on both. But I know I'm a big Christian Gonzalez guy, and so I'm pretty pleased for him to fall there at 10 to the Eagles. He can replace James Bradbury and be your CB2, transition hopefully to a CB1 down the road when Darius Slay leaves. All right, so just to recap our top 10 here. We had the Colts trading up to number 1 to select Bryce Young. Number 2, the Texans took CJ Stroud. At 3, the Cardinals took Will Anderson. At 4, the Bears took Jalen Carter. 5, the Seahawks took Myles Murphy. 6, the Detroit Lions, Devin Witherspoon. At 7, the Raiders took Will Levis. At 8, the Panthers moved up 1 spot to grab Anthony Richardson, the quarterback out of Florida. At 9, the Falcons took Tyree Wilson, the edge rusher from Texas Tech. And at 10, the Philadelphia Eagles took cornerback Christian Gonzalez out of Oregon. That brings up the Tennessee Titans at number 11. Dibes, it's your show.
Love the Christian Gonzalez pick. I remember gushing about that guy a few months ago, and a lot of Eagles fans on our channel was like, who? And now he's like kind of cemented himself as either CB1, CB2, CB3 of this draft, depending on who you talk to. The Tennessee Titans are on the clock here. This one's a no-brainer. They also run up to the podium, just like the Arizona Cardinals. They really need to find kind of that next successor for Taylor Lewan, and getting arguably the offensive tackle number 1 in this class falling into a lap at number 13 or 11 is a no-brainer for the Tennessee Titans. I'm talking about Paris Johnson Jr. out of Ohio State. Paris Johnson was a blue chip talent, 5-star recruit coming in. You look at this guy, man. He played right guard in 2021, played really, really well, transitioned to left tackle in 2022, and really did not look back. Explosive prospect, long arms, elite power, incredible flexibility, just tenacious in just both run support and pass protection, man. He has just a great combination of size, strength, and athleticism, man. This guy is has Pro Bowl upside. And I think he fits in really well there with the Tennessee Titans at number 11.
All right. First tackle, first offensive lineman off the board. Now the Houston Texans are back on the clock, looking for somebody to pair with their quarterback of the future. Mark, what do you got for us?
Yeah, Dodge took the decision out of my hands there. That was one of the 2 players I was definitely looking at. He's also my offensive tackle number 1, so I'm happy to hear Dibes also has him at tackle number 1, because I definitely trust both of your opinions on offensive line evaluation more than my own. That's something that I always kind of defer to you two on that one. And I also have Paris Johnson 1 there. So I'm going to look to a different Ohio State player to pair with my Ohio State quarterback. And I'm going to wide receiver, and I'm going to, every year in the class, we all have our guys, and we all have our guys we like more than consensus and the guys that we argue for. There's no question that my 2 guys in this year's class are 1, Myles Murphy, and 2, Jackson Smith-Njigba, who I absolutely love as a prospect. I have him as my number 7 overall prospect, 6 foot, 200 pounds. I'm just going to implore everybody, do not forget what this guy did in 2021. He had 95 catches for 1,606 yards with a 17 yards per catch, 9 touchdowns. He had a 347-yard game with 3 touchdowns in the Rose Bowl against Utah, against a good defense. I think he'd be a no-doubt top 10 pick if he would have played in 2022. Some people are worried about him being a slot receiver. I don't think those people realize that he played with Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave the year that he played at Ohio State. And by the way, he outperformed them both from the slot. He put up better numbers than Wilson or Olave did in the same offense. And they were both very good this year. And they both think, by the way, that Jackson Smith-Njigba was the best of the 3. They repeated all to anyone who would hear that Jackson Smith-Njigba was by far the best receiver in that famous now receiver room. And I agree with them, and the stats do too. I think he could potentially be an outside receiver, and just because he wasn't asked to doesn't mean he can't. it means he was elite in the slot and had two outside receivers that are also elite next to him. He gets open at an insane rate. He's a wildly dangerous yak threat. He was a 5-star prospect and a top 5 prospect overall in his class. Great against man, finds zones against zone coverage, great tracking the ball down the field, especially for a 6-foot guy. You wouldn't expect him to be able to go up and get it the way that he can. Nasty stiff arm. I mean, you give me all that. I don't care where you line up. You can line up, 10 yards backwards. I don't care. He's been compared to Amon-Ra St. Brown. He's been compared to Devontae Smith. I see some Tyler Lockett in there, but I think there's a good chance he's at least on that level that all three of those guys are in terms of being that, top 15 level receiver.
All right. I remember last year you were already talking about Jackson Smith-Njigba. I wondered how far he was going to get down here. I didn't think he would get to the point I could take him. So Mark takes Jackson Smith-Njigba for the Texans. That puts me on the clock with the Jets, who desperately need a quarterback. This team was a quarterback away from being in the playoffs last year and maybe winning some games. And Zach Wilson is just not it, unfortunately. And without a pretty big trade up, they're not going to be able to get their quarterback in this draft either. So maybe they make a move in free agency. I don't know what the Jets are going to do at quarterback. It's a problem that they have to solve, but they also have other problems they need to solve. And one of those problems is on the offensive line, where they need help at tackle. They need help at center. They could probably use some help at guard. And so I'm going to take offensive tackle / maybe not an offensive tackle, Peter Skoronski out of Northwestern. He's 6'4", 315, which is a little undersized for being an offensive tackle in the NFL, but he took over at Northwestern for Rashawn Slater, who was 6'4", 304. He was even lighter than Skoronski is. And honestly, he reminds me a lot of Rashawn Slater. Teams thought Rashawn Slater might be an interior offensive lineman as well, and he's been fine for the Chargers out on the edge. So the Jets are going to take Skoronski. Maybe he is their right tackle, taking over for Mekhi Becton, who can't ever stay healthy anyways. If it doesn't work out, you kick him inside and you've got a really good guard. But whatever they end up doing at quarterback, they're going to need help on the offensive line. And Skoronski fits the bill perfectly. So Skoronski at 13 to the Jets. And that puts Mark back on the clock with the New England Patriots at pick 14.
And I'm going right back to the same position group that I was just in. So I apologize that I'm ransacking the receivers here, but I'm going to take a look at Jordan Addison out of USC. And I think that he's the perfect addition to New England, because New England's, they've had so many number 2, number 3 receivers, but they haven't had a number 1 receiver. And I don't know that Jordan Addison is that. I mean, he's only 6 foot. He's got some drops issues. There are some things to be concerned about with Jordan Addison. But you turn on the tape and you're like, man, this guy can do some things that I don't think there's been a player on the Patriots who can do those things in a very long time. Especially now, I think they're losing Jacoby Myers to free agency, and all the word is that they don't intend on bringing him back. So I think Jordan Addison fills probably their biggest need, in my opinion. 3-year contributor. He had his best year at Pitt with Kenny Pickett in 2021. 100 catches for 1,600 yards and 17 touchdowns. He transferred to USC. Had a little bit of a disappointing season statistically with Caleb Williams. 60 catches, 900 yards, 8 touchdowns in 11 games. But if you watch the tape, I think that it's a little bit more impressive than the stats are. And I think Jordan Addison's a guy who pops off the tape. And if you were watching USC games in general this year, he was someone where you just go, whoa, that guy is just moving at a different speed and moving in a different way than a lot of these other guys. And he's a great route runner with a wide route tree. So I think Jordan Addison's the exact type of guy that the Patriots should be looking for at 14.
All right, so Mark continues his receiver run. Now it is up to Dibes with the Green Bay Packers. A lot of unknown in the future for the Packers with Aaron Rodgers and all the things going on. We can only guess at what's going to happen, and so as we make these picks. But Dibes, you take it away here. What do you think the Packers are going to do at pick 15?
Yeah, they have a lot of needs here, but this is the first round. We owe the best player available. Pound for pound, the best guy available right now. We are running to the podium and selecting Brian Branch, safety here. He's not the biggest guy. He's only 6 foot, 193 pounds, but he plays bigger than his frame. You look at his 2 seasons with the Crimson Tide, man, 82 tackles, only missed a single tackle over that span per Pro Football Focus. You look at the last 3 years, 23 pass breakups, 2 interceptions, 15 and a half tackles for loss, man. the thing to know about Brian Branch, other than his amazing performance in the college football playoff, is his versatility. He can thrive at nickel. He can thrive at safety. I think his game is tailor-made to translate extremely well to the NFL level. Again, doesn't have ideal size, but he's outstanding in coverage. He's an outstanding tackler. Brian Branch to the Green Bay Packers, man, adding some youth to that secondary in Green Bay.
All right, I like it. That puts me on the clock with the Washington Commanders at pick 16, another team that could desperately use a quarterback, although if you believe what they're saying, they think Sam Howell's the guy. I don't know. We'll see how that shakes out, but another position that they could really use some help at. They could use linebacker. Obviously, Jamin Davis has just not panned out for being a first-round pick. Cole Holcomb is set to become a free agent, but there's really not good value on the board at linebacker at this point. There's not a quarterback that you can take. I don't really like the O-line value at this spot, but there is a guy that I do like that I think fits the need for them, and that is Joey Porter Jr., cornerback out of Penn State. I think Washington could use some upgrades at cornerback. Obviously, they got Kendall Fuller, Benjamin St-Juste. It's not an awe-inspiring group. And you look at Joey Porter Jr., 6'2", 194 pounds. He's huge and he's long. Like, I swear, like his finger, he can touch his toes without even leaning over. His arms are so long. And he had 27 tackles, 11 pass breakups this year. He allowed 3.7 yards per passing attempt that targeted him, which was the 5th best in the nation. And he contested 76% of passes that were thrown his way, which was 4th in the nation. Like I said, he's got long arms. He's good at the catch point. He's really good at raking across the receiver's arms, trying to jostle the ball out. Thought he's a good tackler. He's a little stiff in his transitions in coverage, but he's huge. And so that's kind of some of the cons of being such a big player. But overall, you'll take that for what he provides at the catch point. I think it's a huge need for Washington, who's invested so much in the trenches, but they've been unable to get the most out of it due to the abysmal play of their back seven. So Joey Porter Jr. to the Commanders, and that puts the Pittsburgh Steelers up on the clock.
Yeah, and the Pittsburgh Steelers are happy that the Commanders didn't make the pick that I thought they might. But Joey Porter Jr. was actually also on the board for the Steelers there. I was definitely taking a look at him. Would have been funny to add Joey Porter's son to the Steelers team. Joey Porter, obviously Steelers legend there. So Joey Porter Jr. I've seen that in mocks a lot, and it's a fun little nugget to throw in there in the mocks when you write the blurb in there. But in terms of the need, offensive line is very clearly Pittsburgh's biggest need. And with Broderick Jones still on the board, they're going to go ahead and run to the podium and take Broderick Jones, 6'4", 310, former 5-star prospect and a basketball star, just an absolute athlete. And he was great on the best team in the country this year for the national champions and did not allow many pressures whatsoever. But the best part of his game is that he's an elite run blocker. And that's exactly what Pittsburgh wants to do. Mike Tomlin wants to run the ball, maybe to his detriment sometimes. And I think that getting Broderick Jones and a tackle in there who's special at run blocking, I think that's exactly what Pittsburgh wants to do. And I think he fits their scheme perfectly.
All right. That puts the Detroit Lions on the clock. That's you, Dibes. What do you have for me?
Defense. We went Devin Witherspoon, CB1 there in the top of the draft. We're going to continue that defensive train here with pick number 18. You look at the Lions defense ranked last in total defense. Only the Bears and Cardinals allow more points per game than the Detroit Lions. They rank 28th in DVOA for defense, man. Let's add more talent next to Aiden Hutchinson on that defensive line. And I'm looking at Bryan Bresee here, interior defensive lineman, man. Amazing physical attributes, elite power, agility for his size, man. Plays with leverage, really good power in his lower body, does a really good job consistently managing double teams in the run game. I think he can fit in a 4-3. I think he can fit in a 3-4. Just explodes into the backfield, man. You see him consistently just nabbing ball carriers down in behind the line of scrimmage, man. Just outstanding lateral movement skills. He's a really good penetrator. So he's a little polarizing. People are kind of in or out on Bryan Bresee. but I think he's a top 20 pick, and I think he makes a ton of sense here for the Detroit Lions at pick 18.
All right. And that's going to bring up the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team that needs, honestly, they need everything, right? Tom Brady's gone. The depth chart is looking mighty thin. Honestly, you just want to grab a player that you're pretty sure is going to be really good. And so for me, that's going to be Lucas Van Ness, edge rusher out of Iowa. If it's a need for them, they could really use help about anywhere on the defensive line. I feel like anytime you're going to start a rebuild, you need to start in the trenches, and that's where the Buccaneers are at. They're at rebuild. They had their fun with Tom Brady. They won a ring for it, and now it's time to figure out what's next. And without the ability to go get a quarterback here to really jumpstart that, they're going to build through the trenches. Take Lucas Van Ness out of Iowa. All right, and that brings the Seahawks back on the clock. The Seahawks previously selected Myles Murphy, the edge rusher out of Clemson, at 5. Mark, what do you have for us at 20 for the Seahawks?
I'm very tempted to take Brian Brzee from Clemson and just put two Clemson defensive line together again.
He went off. He's off the board. He went off at 18 here.
The line. See, there it is. That's me. That's me. Good thing I wasn't going to take him anyway. But there goes that nugget. But I will say that there's still a player that this is another player that I'm a lot higher than consensus on, it seems like. And, it's weird for me to be a lot higher than consensus on an offensive guard. But I'm looking at Osiris Torrance here for Seattle at number 20, 6'5", 350.
Nice.
Played 3 seasons and started every game at ULL, then transferred to Florida with his coach, Billy Napier. First team All-American at right guard, quick and ferocious in the run game, moves to the second level really well. When he's driven off his spot initially, shows the ability to regather and re-anchor. To me, Torrance is a near-perfect interior O-line prospect. The question, as always, is what is an interior offensive lineman worth and how much should you invest there, and is it worth a first-round pick? In this case, it's one of Seattle's biggest needs. I think it's probably their second biggest need after an edge rusher, which we addressed with our first pick. So in this case, I think it is worth it. And I think in general, me and Shane have talked about this a lot on Chalk Talk, but we talked about it a lot with safety. Safety, you see in free agency that these safeties are getting paid more and more and more money. Yet then when it comes draft time, it seems like the safeties get pushed down the board and they don't go as high as maybe they should as prospects because of the positional, value there. I think that you could probably make the same argument for offensive guard. I mean, you've seen teams like Kansas City go out and really put an emphasis on fixing their interior line with Humphrey and Smith in the draft. And then I think they signed, I think was it Tooney at guard. They signed it in free agency as well. But I think that you're seeing in free agency, offensive guards are getting paid, but then in the draft, they're getting pushed down. And I mean, you see it with a guy like Landon Dickerson, who obviously he was pushed down due to injury more than due to position. But I think he's been one of the best picks of recent memory for the Eagles in the second round. And he was obviously a first round talent. I kind of feel the same here about Torrance. I think he's very clearly a very safe prospect and a first-round talent here. I don't know if he'll go in the first round, though, because he's a guard.
I think he will go in the first round. You saw guys like Elijah Vera Tucker go higher than people anticipated. I think that'd be a great pick for Seattle. They sort of got their bookend tackles both in the same draft last year, which is just insane. So continuing to build through the trenches again is sort of the theme here. Hey, it's a Philly podcast. We talk about the trenches a lot. So now we skip past what would have been the Dolphins pick because they cheated. And we're going to move on to the Los Angeles Chargers. Dibes, you are up on the clock here. Where are you headed?
I'm excited for this one because this is one of my guys. So I'm really happy he's still on the board here. It was definitely going to be one position. It really, at the end of the day, is about keeping Justin Herbert happy and adding speed and a playmaker to that offense. And the guy I'm circling, he's not underrated anymore. The guy has been climbing draft boards through this process, and that is Zay Flowers out of Boston College. Zay Flowers, he's got some size concerns, 5'10", 172 pounds, but talk about one of the most incredibly explosive athletes in this draft. Super agile, big-time dynamic talent, can thrive both inside and outside. Will most likely be heavily in the slot moving forward, but does an amazing job creating separation up and down the route tree, man. I get giddy just thinking about Justin Herbert and Zay Flowers, man. His ability to change directions at the drop of a hat, get the ball to this guy in space, man. He is lightning in a bottle, man. So for me, Zay Flowers to the LA Chargers.
When you started talking about speed, I got really worried because I'm sitting here at 22 with the Baltimore Ravens, and the Baltimore Ravens desperately need wide receiver help. And
it was between
a wide receiver.
Him and that guy.
Yeah, I wanted a wide receiver, but I did not want Zay Flowers. Not because I don't like Zay Flowers, but because I think he's more of a slot guy. And the Ravens use Mark Andrews in the slot so much already. They need a big-bodied receiver outside, and so they're going to take Quentin Johnson, the wide receiver from TCU, because only good things happen when you draft receivers from TCU in the 20s. So, but Quentin Johnson is not Jalen Reagor. He's huge. He's 6'4", 212. He's probably one of the bigger athletic freaks in the class. He's going to probably run a 4.3 at the combine. He really broke out in 2022 at TCU, had over 1,000 yards receiving, averaged almost 18 yards per reception. He's just an explosive playmaker, and that's something that the Ravens need. They need somebody besides Mark Andrews that they can throw the football to, and he has it all. He's got that rare combination of size, speed, quickness. Now, he struggles a little bit against like press coverages. He's not the most he doesn't have the most sure hands and like contested catch opportunities, but that's fine. Like Lamar will take anything. The Ravens go get a receiver to keep Lamar happy, and it's Quentin Johnson out of TCU, and that is going to put the Minnesota Vikings up on the clock. And so, Mark, that's you. Talk to us about the Vikings and what they might need.
Well, the first thing I'll ask is if there's any teams that are interested in moving up the board.
Ooh.
No.
Yeah, I think I'm good too.
All right, then I'm going to reach a little bit because I think the Vikings need a corner, but there was a good amount of corners that I'd actually be fine taking here if I'm the Vikings. But I'm going to take a look at this. Is really low on PFF, and this just kind of I tweeted out like a list of rankings on PFF that I think are some of the most ridiculous rankings I've seen PFF ever have on the mock draft simulator. Keely Ringo is top 25 on the Ringer. Like Todd McShay had him going top 15 this week. I think Kuiper had him going like top 12 2 weeks ago. There's no reason for Keely Ringo to be ranked 75th here. I get that he gets beat by some double moves every once in a while. I get that he's a little bit susceptible on deep balls, but when you're a 6'2" beast with every trait you could want in the corner that absolutely attack the run, he's a great tackler. He had the game-winning pick 6 in 2021. He's played against the best quarterbacks in the country. He's played against the best receivers in the country, and he's played at the highest level in the country at Georgia, and he's played on the best defense in the country for 2 years running. So I think Keely Ringo has showed me more than enough that he's the number 4 corner in this class.
All right, Keely Ringo. Yeah, that I actually kind of forgot about him as we were going along here, and not because he's a bad player, but out of sight, out of mind. And I'm not operating off of my own draft board yet. So yeah, he's easy to forget about in some of these.
And something that's interesting with him, and I've heard McShay and Big Cat, they were talking about it on Part of My Take, that he might be a safety. He with his size and his ability to tackle and his ability to stop the run, he might end up playing safety. But I almost look at that as a positive. I think a lot of people will hear that and be like, oh, he's not a corner. Like, he must be a safety. To me, I look at it and say, he clearly can play corner. He might be better at safety. He might be someone you can bounce back and forth depending on if you get an injury. And, we saw this year how important that can be when obviously Avonte Maddox goes out from playing slot corner. You're able to shift Chauncey Gardner-Johnson over from safety to slot corner because he's got that versatility. Obviously, Ringo, a much different player than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson, probably like 6 inches bigger or 5 inches bigger than Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. But some of that similar positional versatility in terms of Chauncey can switch between slot and safety, whereas I think Ringo could potentially switch between outside corner and safety.
All right. We do have a comment coming in here. So before I throw it to you for your pick, Dibes, at 24, we've got Dante Hill asks on YouTube here, what's the difference in Hendon Hooker and Will Levis?
One of them was...
Go ahead, Mark.
One of them was good last year, and one of them wasn't. And then the one that wasn't is going in the top 10 probably.
Well, it starts with age. Hendon Hooker will be a 25-year-old rookie coming in who's a developmental guy starting from the jump. Number two, Hendon Hooker really struggles throwing on the run. He's kind of in a gimmicky offense there for Tennessee. He only completed 7 completions outside of the pocket last year. That is a big time struggle for him. Will Levis is all about upside. And yes, Will Levis struggled. He also had big time flashes. And I'm not arguing that he didn't struggle, but Will Levis, when it comes to throwing out of the pocket, when it comes to arm strength, when it comes to decision making, I think he's checks off all the boxes compared to Hendon Hooker. I think Hendon Hooker is definitely like a round 2, round 3 guy. He's still recovering from injury there. But I like Hendon Hooker. I do. I think he's slightly underrated right now.
He's also coming off an ACL injury, correct?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So you got 25-year-old rookie coming off of an ACL injury, inconsistent deep ball placement. So I mean, I think those are some of the concerns. Will Levis has more of the tools than Hooker. Hooker played in a really QB-friendly offense, so I think that probably factors into it a little bit as well. Yeah.
Yeah, my comment there about the comment was less about Hendon Hooker and more about Will Levis. I'm not in on Will Levis. That wasn't trying to say that I think Hooker's better. Obviously, coming off an ACL injury, and on paper, Will Levis is the best quarterback in the world.
All right. So yeah, appreciate you guys. I'm gonna skate right by that comment and say appreciate you guys that are watching us here live. Those of you that are listening later, appreciate you all too. You can always shoot us questions on Twitter and things. I'll give all our tags here at the end for those of you listening later on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else. But Dibes, you're up at 24 here with the Jaguars. Doug Peterson, what are you giving Doug here for his playoff run next year?
Yeah, the cornerback train just continues to roll here in the first round. The two needs for Jacksonville: offensive line and defensive back. And I'm going to take, I think, one of the best defensive backs in the group here. The guy I'm looking at is Cam Smith. He just has great tools, great measurables. I like Cam Smith a lot. 6'1", 187 pounds, solid athlete, really good fluidity. He definitely projects to be a CB1 down the road. He's improved every single year during his time at South Carolina. He's really good at initiating contact. He rarely draws flags, and he's a missile in run support. So a lot of physical gifts, a lot of mental toughness here for Cam Smith, and I think Jacksonville continues to add youth to that secondary.
All right. That puts the Giants on the clock here. The Giants, they need a lot of things. We don't know what they're going to do with Daniel Jones. I would assume he's going to be on the roster next year. They could use some help on the interior offensive line. It's just not a position I think falls right here. They could use a cornerback, but they also need some weapons. Giants wide receivers last year had 9 targets in the end zone. That was the lowest in the league per Next Gen Stats. They just did not. Obviously, there was injuries, all those sorts of things going along. But at the end of the year, they were really rolling out Daniel Bellinger, Richie James, and Isaiah Hodgins as their weapons for Daniel Jones. And so they desperately need some help there. And so with the wide receivers not falling the way that they would have probably preferred them to, they're going to go to tight end, and they're going to take Michael Mayer, tight end out of Notre Dame. Had 809 yards, 9 touchdowns last year for Notre Dame. I mean, he's an easy guy to buy into, right? He's really good inline blocker. Maybe not the best receiving tight end in the draft. There might be some guys that have a slight edge there, but when you're looking at a tight end, if you can't get in line and block, you're really just a big receiver. And that's not what we want. We want some versatility. He can block. He can help that run game for Saquon Barkley, for Daniel Jones, for the read option game, those sorts of things that they're going to try to do. And he's got really good contested catch ability. He's really good at the catch point. He's a mismatch over the middle of the field. Now, obviously, sometimes tight ends, they don't come into the league and take the league by storm. So it's not the sexy pick. Obviously, tight end's not maybe the most important position, but near the back end of the first round, I think it's the best weapon you can get at this point for the offense. And I would be really interested to see what Brian Dable could do with Michael Mayer.
Yeah, Michael Mayer is one of my absolute favorite guys in the class. Let's not mention the fact that I'm a Notre Dame fan and I'm very biased, but I will just say that I think he's one of the surest things in the class. And a funny little comp here, he actually reminds me a little bit of a cross between Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz. Like, I think that there is parts of both of the guys that are in there. He blocks like Goddard. He's very just an elite blocker for a tight end as an inline blocker. And then he gets open and finds soft zones and gets first downs in a similar way to Zach Ertz. But he's also kind of a threat to run you over and get an angry run scepter from Kyle Brandt and Good Morning Football, which Dallas Goedert did this season. So it is funny that the last two Eagles tight ends are the two people that I see a little bit of in Mayer, former 5-star prospect. And you mentioned that he's great at the catch point. He led all tight ends in contested catches at 17 last season. He's actually the pick I was about to make at 26 here with Dallas. I guess either way, I'd be depressed. I'm going to be very depressed if Michael Mayer is a Cowboy or a Giant. I don't want to see either of those. I was hoping maybe he'd last to 28 to Cincinnati. That'd be a perfect landing spot for him. But New York makes a ton of sense. So for Dallas here at 26, I'm going to look and I'm going to take a corner because, man, when they had some injuries, it really fell apart last year. At the end of the year, their defense really took a dive after some injuries in the secondary. And I'm going to take a look at a guy that Dibes drafted in a mock that we did last night, and a guy that I like a lot out of Mississippi State. I'm looking at Emmanuel Forbes, and he's just a ball hawk. He's got 14 picks in his 3 years at Mississippi State. He's a 3-year contributor, and that system has done really well at producing D-backs into the NFL. So I'm very high on Emmanuel Forbes. He's one of these guys that as the draft, as I'm looking more and more into it, I think he's a guy who, I started with him as a fringe top 40 guy. Then he made it into getting a first round grade. Now he's in my top 20. I think there's a chance that Emmanuel Forbes ends up in my top 15 by the end of this draft process. And the more I watch this guy, the more I really, really like him. And I mentioned that Ringo was my CB4 earlier on, but man, you just base it on tape. Forbes' tape is a lot better than Ringo's. Forbes' tape is more impressive and, jumps off the page more. Ringo's got the traits on him a little bit and the size and some of the ability there. But, maybe a good combine performance from Forbes. And this is a guy that ends up in my top 15. Like, I love watching this guy. I think he's got that dog in him.
All right. So that puts the Buffalo Bills on the clock at 27. I really wish I was drafting for the Bills at this point because I've got a slam dunk pick if I was on, but I'm not on the clock. Dibes, you're on the clock here for the Bills. Tell me what you're thinking.
Yeah, this one is a no-brainer. A no-brainer. I think the interior offensive line for the Buffalo Bills really let them down through times in 2022. That's definitely an area that needs a major upgrade in a big way. And luckily, my interior offensive lineman number 2 in this class is still there, and that's John Michael Schmitz. The dude is massive. You look at this guy, he was one of my winners of the Senior Bowl. John Michael Schmitz, 6'4", 320 pounds, has not allowed a single sack in his career at Minnesota. Just 14 hurries in 5+ seasons there. Just a phenomenal prospect. He's not really a lead in any area. He's just an all-around balanced center prospect. Versatility was the major question mark for this guy coming into the Senior Bowl. He practiced at all 3 interior lineman spots at the Senior Bowl and absolutely dominated every single practice. John Michael Schmitz is a terrific prospect, and I think he could play anywhere on that interior for the Buffalo Bills for the foreseeable future.
All right, Bills going interior offensive line. That puts the Cincinnati Bengals up on the clock. And again, there's a few different places that the Bengals could go here. Obviously, they would love to upgrade the offensive tackle. At the same time, it's like, does that even matter? Joe Burrow's kind of proven that he's so good at getting the ball out and some of those things. They could look at safety. Because, Jesse Bates played on the franchise tag this season. It's expected he's going to probably walk in free agency. If he doesn't, it's probably because Von Bell is gone. But I don't really love where safety leaves us at this point. They could use maybe defensive line, an edge rusher. They could use tight end. I already shot my tight end bullet. I'm trying to decide if I want to be the guy that drafts another tight end in the first round here.
I'll
I think
just
I'm good.
I'll chime
ahead.
in to help you decide your decision. If you're thinking about going away from safety, is there a chance they move Daxton Hill back to safety?
Maybe. I mean, so Daxton Hill was drafted sort of a star type of player, right? I mean, he played safety, he played nickel, he kind of settled into the nickel for them. So that could make sense, which is where it could make sense also to draft another cornerback if they're going to do that. And so I think there's a lot of things. It's an interesting board for the Bengals. For me, it comes down to cornerback or it comes down to tight end. I'm going to stick here at cornerback, and I'm going to take Deonte Banks out of Maryland. He's not necessarily like a nickel corner. He's 6'1", 200 pounds. I guess you could put him in the slot. He's got some injury concerns coming out of college, but I think he's got good size. He's got good length. He's going to be a fine athlete. He can get up and press and be physical at the line of scrimmage. And so taking a guy that help out the back end of your defense, Eli Apple is still a starter for this team. Regardless of what you do at safety, you would love to upgrade that. So I really kicked her. This one was hard. I really wanted to take a tight end here, but they've got so many weapons on offense already. I really feel like they need to address the defense. So we're going to go Deonte Banks here at pick 28. And that brings up the New Orleans Saints at pick 29 with a pick that they will surely trade to the Eagles before the draft. But we won't do that here. Mark, you've got the Saints. What's on your mind?
I'm going to go ahead and take one of my favorite players in the draft. And by the way, I think I get questions about that on Twitter sometimes when I say that. When I say favorite player of the draft, I'm not necessarily meaning like this is my third best player of the draft or my third favorite player. What I'm saying is compared to how most people view them, I am higher on them than consensus. And I find myself defending Jalin Hyatt in a lot of conversations on Twitter about him. And a lot of people are worried about Jalin Hyatt because he hasn't played a lot against press coverage. Well, guess what? You shouldn't cover a cheetah right up against him. So that's why you don't play Jalin Hyatt in press coverage, because he'll burn you. So people are saying like, oh, can he beat press coverage? Have you watched the guy run? I think he can beat press coverage. Like, that's not something that concerns me, to be quite honest. And people are saying like, oh, I just don't understand why people get so tied into molds. And it's like we've seen so many receivers that are undersized and different profiles and builds now succeed at the NFL level. And people are, comparing him to classic first round busts. This guy had 67 catches and 1,267 yards. He had 19 yards per catches. Like this guy was making big play after big play after big play, led the country in 20+ yard plays. And you go on and you turn on the film, especially from the month of October when he was beating Alabama and he played LSU and Tennessee was putting up 50 points with Hendon Hooker, the guy we were talking about earlier. But it was because of Jalin Hyatt more than it was because of Hendon Hooker. That guy's got special video game speed, and you go ahead and you put him next to Chris Olave. That's a really interesting wide receiver combo. Now you just have to figure out what the heck you're going to do at quarterback if you're the Saints. But apparently Derek Carr went there, sniffed around, and said, "This doesn't smell good. I don't want to play quarterback here." So I don't know who's going to play quarterback. I don't know if it'll be Jameis, but if it is Jameis, then Jalin Hyatt would be the perfect guy to throw deep to if you're Jameis Winston.
All right, Jalin Hyatt off the board here to the Saints. We've got another question coming in. Would you hate a trade for Philadelphia from 10 to 29 for next year's first and additional picks? I mean, it'd depend on what the deal was, but it would have to be a lot more than just next year's first.
That's a big drop.
Because you would be giving up a top 10 pick to move down to a conference champion pick. And although I'm sure that the Saints will not be a conference champion, presumably they won't be the 10th overall pick again. They've got to do something at quarterback. So I probably wouldn't want to move that far back personally.
Agreed.
It depends on who's there. Like if we're talking Miles Murphy's there, Tyree Wilson's there, Devin Witherspoon's there. No, I'm not making that move.
All right, that puts the Philadelphia Eagles back on the clock at number 30. Guys, I didn't think we were going to get here. Because I really thought he was coming off the board at 27 to Buffalo, and he didn't. And I had a guy that I wanted to take here, but I can't take the guy I wanted to take with Bijan Robinson on the board. I mean, we're not letting this guy fall out of the first round. We lose all credibility as a mock drafting organization. And Bijan Robinson, man, can you imagine him in this offense? Can you imagine an Eagles offense with A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith outside? And so you've got to take guys out of the box to cover that. And all of a sudden you've got to account for Jalen Hurts, and Dallas Goedert's a good blocker. And oh, by the way, you could hand the ball off to Bijan Robinson, probably the best running back to come out in the draft since Saquon Barkley. And so the Eagles are going to take Bijan Robinson, 6 foot, 220-pound running back out of Texas. He's 21 years old. He rushed for 1,580 yards last season, 6.1 yards per carry, 18 touchdowns. He also caught 19 passes. He had 100-plus yards in 9 of Texas's final 10 games. He led the nation in missed tackles forced. He's patient. He runs with vision. He's explosive. He's powerful. He can run you over. He's elusive. He can make you miss. He's a natural pass catcher. He's a good pass blocker. There's literally no holes in his game. And if he was not a running back, if this was 10 years ago, this guy would be a top 10, maybe a top 5 pick. He's that good. Positional value, all that. At 30th overall, you sprint to the podium and you take Bijan Robinson. So that's my pick. I can't wait to see what people think about that one. All right.
Can't complain.
And that is going to take us to the final pick of the first round here. It is the Kansas City Chiefs. Dibes, you're up. Do us all a favor and pick a punter for them or something. Some
Tanner
small
McKee.
measure of revenge.
Tanner McKee. No, I'm just kidding. All right. You look at kind of their needs. I know they list wide receiver. I'm just joking, Shane. That was sarcasm.
I know.
Wide receiver, defensive line is not the need I'm looking at here. I'm looking at best talent available for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think what's their bread and butter is protecting Patrick Mahomes over everything else, man. Kansas City's offensive line had a terrific season in 2022. They held the Eagles to nothing, no sacks in the Super Bowl. You look at both starting offensive tackles for the Chiefs being unrestricted free agents. The guy I am looking at is Anton Harrison here out of Oklahoma. Get him a 6'6", 309-pound offensive tackle. He has the feet of a smaller player. He looks like a power forward out there. He's only surrendered 9 pressures on 447 pass blocking snaps in 2022. Just a true finesse player who has a really great hand usage. I have a round 1 grade on him. It just makes a ton of sense for the Chiefs to kind of continue to build around Patrick Mahomes. And if you give that guy time, you're going to win a lot of games.
All right. So there you have it. I'll run through the picks here real quickly. We will tweet this out later, but at number 1, the Indianapolis Colts took quarterback Bryce Young. 2, the Texans took quarterback C.J. Stroud. 3, the Cardinals took edge rusher Will Anderson Jr. At 4, the Chicago Bears took defensive lineman Jalen Carter. At 5, the Seattle Seahawks took edge rusher Myles Murphy. At 6, the Detroit Lions took cornerback Devin Witherspoon. At 7, the Raiders took quarterback Will Levis. At 8, the Panthers took quarterback Anthony Richardson. At 9, the Falcons edge rusher Tyree Wilson. 10, the Eagles cornerback Christian Gonzalez. 11, the Titans tackle Paris Johnson Jr. At 12, the Texans took wide receiver Jackson Smith and Jigba. At 13, the Jets took tackle Peter Skoronski. At 14, the Patriots took wide receiver Jordan Addison. 15, the Giants. Not the Giants. The Packers took safety Brian Branch. At 16, the Washington, not football team, the Commanders. I am struggling here, y'all. The Commanders took cornerback Joey Porter Jr. At 17, the Steelers tackle Broderick Jones. 18, the Lions defensive lineman Brian Bresee. At 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers took edge rusher Lucas Van Ness. 20, the Seahawks took guard Osiris Torrance. 21, the Chargers took wide receiver Zay Flowers. Starting a wide receiver run here as the Ravens go at 22 to take Quentin Johnson. At 23, the Vikings took Keely Ringo. 24, the Jags cornerback Cam Smith. 25, the Giants tight end Michael Mayer. 26, the Cowboys, cornerback Emmanuel Forbes. 27, the Bills, interior offensive lineman John Michael Schmitz. 28, the Bengals, cornerback Deonte Banks. At 29, the Saints took wide receiver Jalen Hyatt. At 30, the Eagles landed running back Bijan Robinson. And at 31, the Chiefs took tackle Anton Harrison to close out the first round. All right, guys, we did it. Official first full round mock draft. Just a way to sort of intro you guys into draft coverage. We're going to be doing, like I said, top 5 position breakdowns. We'll do some Eagles 7-round mock drafts. We'll be doing all kinds of, combine coverage, risers and fallers, all of that sort of stuff. But wanted to kick it off with a baseline of a first round mock draft. So there you go. We'll tweet this out. You guys can let us know what you think. It's always a fun exercise. I know people will say that mock drafts are a waste of time, whatever. Mock drafts are just playing out scenarios. It's seeing how the board could fall. It's an interesting way to talk about the players, an interesting way to talk about the fits with teams and what team needs are. So that's why we do them. That's why we chose to start it off this way. So before we get out of here, before we get done, I'll kick it to you first, Mark. You got any final thoughts? Any draft takes you need to fire off? Any thoughts on this draft that we just did?
No, I think I got him off. I spread my Jackson Smith and Jigba propaganda and my Jalen Hyatt propaganda, my Miles Murphy propaganda. I'll be spreading plenty more propaganda, I'm sure, and you can go check it out at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter and hear it on the Tough Cover Radio Show every Saturday from 11 to 1 on Fox Sports The Gambler.
All right. Dibes, what about you? Any final thoughts? Any takes you need to fire off about the draft?
No, I'm still pretty much locked in with Devin Witherspoon, cornerback out of Illinois, to the Philadelphia Eagles at number 10. Thanks, Dante. If you like the NFL draft, I cover it literally 4 to 5 videos a week, live, not live videos covering top 10 positions, things I think, Senior Bowl winners, most underrated prospects. I've done 5 of those videos. So if you love the NFL draft, check out Party on Broad.
All right. So you guys check these guys out. Mark is at Mark Henry Jr. _ on Twitter. Dibes is at Mr. Crockpot. Check out their various shows, their various draft work. We'll have these guys around here some more. I will be back again on Monday next week. We'll be breaking down some more NFL draft stuff, maybe get into some position rankings for you guys. So for those of you that watched live here on YouTube, different experience maybe with it being live streamed. I hope you guys enjoyed that. It's always fun to be able to interact with our live viewers. For those of you listening later on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, we appreciate you guys as well. Be sure that you are subscribed to BGN Radio. The draft content, we're just getting started. This is just the tip of the iceberg. There's going to be a lot of stuff coming your way. So keep it tuned to BGN Radio for all your draft coverage needs. Go Birds.